start with a dripping nose at the very beginning. I just want to give a shout out to Mr. Radisson, my English and drama teacher from 24 years ago. I think without pushing our comfort level from that young age, I don't know if I could stand in front of an audience and speak about something so close as to losing a parent. Thank you to the Family and Friends Foundation for allowing me to share this evening. During the last Pink and Chocolate that I attended, I was in awe of Mr. Kerr and his willingness and bravery to submerge in a world he would perhaps prefer to leave behind. Good evening to all of those in attendance tonight. I am sure most of us here this evening have been touched by cancer, either as a survivor, a support person, or even acquaintance. My married name is Tennille Semeniuk, wife to Jared, and we live on a hobby farm just outside of Russell, but I grew up a Sawchuck on a mixed farm north of Churchbridge. Before I begin this evening, I need to paint a picture of what Jeanette Sawchuck was like as a woman, wife, mother, and friend. She was loud, bold, and told it like it is. Like it or lump it, as she would say. She was practical, frugal, and always put the needs of others ahead of her own, especially the dairy and livestock she raised. She worked from well before dawn till far past dusk with a drive that only Debbie Morash could beat. Until someone arrived in the yard or called to say that they were coming over. I reached out to Mom's family and friends to get a few descriptive words from them so they could help express how she was as a woman. Her sister-in-law says, Jeanette sticks out in my mind as a very hard-working woman with 5-gallon buckets in each hand of feed for the cattle or fresh produce from the garden. Her strength was limitless. Even on the busiest of days, she would always make time for you. She would have the coffee pot on and be interested in what's happening in your life. A second sister recalled, she always had time to help you with a recipe to troubled hearts. She always stopped her busy life to make time for others over a cup of coffee. She always made the time to make someone special cake and invite them over for a visit. Cabbage rolls were made every Saturday evening. She was very thoughtful of everyone and everything. A close niece of my mom said, I have very, very fond memories of Auntie Jeanette, even from the time I was a little girl. I remember going to their house sometimes for the day or an afternoon, and she would always want me to bake something. One thing I recall baking most often was the boxed fake cheesecake things. I don't even think they make them anymore, but Auntie Jeanette had quite a sweet tooth and always had a box on hand for me to make for them whenever I came over. Over the years, we know that she perfected the art of puffed wheat cake, and I can still picture her as she bit into a piece. That look of happiness and contentment washing over her face. She was such a hard worker. Barely had time to sit and eat, but she always made time for 2 breakfasts. To this day, when I have perked coffee at camping, I think of her and how much she enjoyed it. While Auntie Jeanette went through her cancer treatments, we had an opportunity to spend time together because treatments were more often in Regina. She continued to hope and believe that she would be cured, and I think that was a big reason why she was with us for so long. I recall going to a cancer makeover with her one day, and the volunteers at the Ellen Blair Clinic helped women feel better about their appearance, helping them get fitted for wigs and put makeup on. She was quite tickled by the outcome. Not that she was ever a big wearer of makeup, but I think it made her feel good knowing that she looked good. Another niece, Auntie Jeanette loved her family fiercely, her gardening, flowers, and her friendship. She welcomed everyone into her home with a fresh pot of brewed coffee and endless dainties. Her faith was as strong as her work ethic, and her expressive nature I will never forget. Another family member stated, "My first response was going to send you to say how hard of a worker your mom was. But there is a reason why your mom worked so hard. She loved being a farmer. She excelled at it. It's because she loved for and cared deeply of the animals. She had to, because that's what farmers do. She passed that on to you, and you are passing it on to your children. Not just a good work ethic, but the responsibility that comes for caring for our animals. I appreciated how she always checked in on me. She spent a lot of time on the phone. That was her investment to her people that she cared for. Two qualities that are lacking in some people today. No matter how hard something is, you do it because it has to get done. And real connection. Physically taking time to connect with someone. I miss her." At the age of 31, I was a mother to 4 children. 4-year-old Heidi, Harmony, who was 2, and twin 7-week-old girls, Georgia and Desiree. I was at my most vulnerable, being exhausted, still recovering, and being outnumbered in the parent-to-child ratio. It was at this time that I realized my time in Cancerland would soon be ending, as my own mother clung to her life, and we tried to accept her pending death. It is my hope this evening that I can re-enter this emotional journey with strength, yet be vulnerable and raw. I will share with you our time of before, during, and after diagnosis. I will share with you from a perspective of a support person for a cancer patient, as a daughter of not only my mom, but of my father, as we entered unknown territory, with a new world of appointments, testing, medications, medical terms, but above all, uncertainty. Uncertainty of a prognosis, uncertainty of timeline, uncertainty of her final departure. In March of 2012, my mom, Jeanette, had been feeling unwell and had a chest x-ray done, being put on antibiotics and inhalers, and was asked to return if there was no improvement. I had seen her days later at a Ukrainian dance concert, and her appearance stopped me in my tracks. She had lost a significant amount of weight in a short amount of time, had been complaining of a cough, hence the doctor appointment, and from as far back as I can remember, had severe pain, which would flare up at the time that her body would relax for sleep. She would pace the floor with ice packs, heated wheat bags, as the rest of the household slept, and consume painkillers that would not even touch the pain. For years, she had been sleepless, and I feel misunderstood at the severity of pain that she was in. April 2012, Thursday before Good Friday. This day is forever embedded as both disbelief and yet relief. This day we found out about a large mass growing surrounding her pulmonary artery. The day before, she had gone in for her second chest x-ray. As the doctor wasn't impressed, there was no change from the first x-ray taken a month before. Her symptoms had not disappeared or even reduced, and he mentioned he would send her for a CT scan. By the time she got home from the appointment, the CT department from another community called her, and she went in the same day. By the time she returned home, the doctor's office had called her and scheduled an appointment for the following day, Thursday before Good Friday. I had been off work at the time with my second maternity leave. I had 2 kiddos in tow, and I met her right here in Langenburg to get the results. My dad opted to stay with the infant and toddler in the waiting room, and I headed into the appointment with her. The doctor looked at her and explained she had a large mass wrapped around her pulmonary artery. This mass he could only presume to be cancerous, but further testing would need to be done. At this point, I felt my body slowing down to the point of not being able to either hear or retain the remainder of the conversation. I do distinctly remember looking at my mom and thinking, she looks oddly pleased. We left the office collecting the kids and my father from the waiting room, only to have to break the news to him. Once getting to the vehicle, I remember hugging her, which felt sort of foreign for us, telling her that I loved her and I would be with her through all of it. The shock of this news was consuming and would become my life for the next 18 months. When I could feel attentive enough to drive, I left for home, and I remember later that evening, laying on the trampoline with my then 3-year-old, explaining to her about heaven and how her baba, which is grandmother in Ukrainian, taught me it was beautiful and beyond the sky. Heidi learned from a tender age about illness and loss. The following day, the girls and I headed to the farm early in the morning to be there to help digest the news and essentially be there for quality of time while we had it. Now, for those of you who knew my mom, she was like a newspaper reporter or the base of her own network. She was on the phone telling everybody she knew, "Doctor thinks I have cancer," in still quite an impressed tone. She was almost proud and owning it. She was ready to attack this beast that had taken so many nights, forced her on medication she would have never considered taking, robbed her of family moments, of being fully engaged as she tolerated pain for several years. Shortly after our destination wedding in 2007, my mom had begun to experience pain. She had been for endless massage, chiropractor, acupuncture, and physiotherapy in every direction she could attempt. She underwent shoulder surgery in October of 2009 and surgery for stenosis of the spine in February of 2011, all the while fighting pain, taking pills, seeing medical professionals, 7 specialists to be exact, without a single one figuring out the true reason for her pain. She would explain the pain as being located in her shoulder or in her neck, radiating aggressively at the time of her body relaxing before turning into a burning or a spasm feeling. In preparation for this evening, I wanted to do 2 things: refresh my memory of our journey in Cancerland, and 2, be able to accurately reconnect with some experiences, emotions, and feelings that I have stuffed deep into Pandora's box through a busy life and also while coping with grief. In order to reacquaint myself, I reached out to the clinic staff where Mom would receive majority of her care before the referrals began, in hopes I could evaluate from a clinical approach. After receiving the facts of 99+ pages on the day before Mom's 9th deathversary, I dove in, stirring up all of the emotions. I felt the obvious, the pain and lonesomeness of her absence, the shock of reading about my mom in such a vulnerable setting as if she was a character in a book, even though I lived it right alongside her, the dread of re-mourning many of the moments. The anger with medical professionals who I would view as dismissive, yet angry at myself for not being Dr. Google or Dr. House, to direct the consistent complaint in a proper direction to get a diagnosis before stage 4. Statistically, lung cancer is not diagnosed until end stages. Yes, in preparation for tonight, I feel so very responsible, and yet dismissive, as her entire family and friend circles knew for years that her pain was unbearable, yet failed her on getting quicker results. Failed my children and my brother's children the ability to learn from and get love from their Baba. Looking back, I truly cannot understand how such a common thread in her pre-diagnosis could be unrecognized with the education, tools, and technology that we have in a first world country. Some quotes from her medical records were as such. The common thread I'm referring to. Please forgive me as I highlight some of the issues that she endured. Dr. A. She presents today with complaints of severe aching pain that begins in the right pectoral region and radiates through the back of her shoulders. This mainly appears to occur at night. She states that during the day she has full pain-free use of her right arm. This is dated July 2011. Dr. B. She is a 63-year-old female who suffers from chronic pain affecting her right shoulder area, the right upper chest, and right scapula. Her pain is very vague and neuropathic in nature. She describes her pain as a 7 to 8 out of 10 on average. She takes Oxycontin 20 milligrams 3 times daily and Oxysec 4 to 5 tablets a day with gabapentin 900 milligrams 3 times daily, and trazodone 50 milligrams at night, and yet she still states that her pain provides inability to do any function. Dated March 2012. Dr. B, same doctor, states 3 weeks later, 63-year-old female who complains bitterly of pain in the right shoulder and upper neck between her shoulder blades. The pain between her shoulder blades she has had before her neck fusion in 2011. She is on a large dose of opiates and gabapentin, which is a nerve blocker, and yet she is unable to sleep at night from the pain. Dr. C. Chief complaint, she has been short of breath for 3 to 4 years, but in March of this year, she felt congested and therefore went to her family doctor. During chemo and long after the pain had subsided, it had returned, presenting, as Dr. D explained, increasing pain in the mid-back and in the right shoulder area. It appears that the patient does not have optimal pain control. I advise to increase oxycodone for breakthrough pain from 10 milligrams to 15 milligrams every hour as needed. If she requires more than 3 to 4 doses per day, the dose of Oxyneo would need to be increased. Dr. E states, the 62-year-old lady presented with neck pain and radiation to the right arm. Physio states, the current issue we are addressing in her ongoing shoulder pain. Her therapy was focused on addressing these issues. However, her pain continues to increase and her ability to sleep has decreased. The client would prefer not to use medication, but was advised that she should use her medication as prescribed so she can manage and hopefully reduce the pain. The pain specialist. Jeanette is a 63-year-old female who has been complaining of right-sided pain radiating to the right trapezius muscle and the right shoulder, down the bicep muscles for a few years duration. She is currently experiencing a lot of pain despite a large dose of gabapentin, Dilaudid for breakthrough pain, and Percocet, 5 tablets a day, Cymbalta 30 milligrams. MRI results from November of 2011. This patient had a very hard time holding still for the examination. She was moving throughout the entire exam and there is quite a bit of motion-related artifact on all of the obtained images. This was despite repeat instructions. The patient stated that she had unsuccessful MRIs of the shoulder in the past. I'm uncertain as to why she was unable to hold still. She did not indicate that she was anxious. Perhaps she has an underlying tremor. At the time of her lung biopsy, the surgeon who completed this stated that the bronchus intermedius was completely occluded with tumor. The tumor extended up the wall of the bronchus into the right main stem bronchus. April 2012, 10 days before her diagnosis, a second orthopedic surgeon was called in for another opinion, and he condensed the prior 2-year treatment. I'm going to quickly paraphrase this. Very complicated and ongoing history, pain in the right shoulder, rotator cuff tendinopathy and impingement syndrome, wait list for 2 years, Pan Am Clinic in Winnipeg, debridement of the shoulder which provided some relief, persisted neck pain and trapezial spasm radiating into the right arm, MRI scan, disc disease, cervical discectomy and fusion, great initial relief, but then had reoccurrence to her shoulder-based issues, increased gabapentin, referred to pain management. I think that likely Jeanette has been subjected to too much information from too many clinical sources. Further complicating that issue is the fact that she actively has a respiratory complaint. I gather that she has had some form of bronchitis and or pneumonia for about 2 months now. Currently on puffers and antibiotics with no significant clinical improvement. She has been seeing a traditional Chinese physician. He believes there may be signs of congestive heart failure. I see no clinical signs of congestive heart failure. Therefore, I will make another referral. The mass on our pulmonary artery was large. We knew this entering Cancerland. Staging would be done and more cancer would be found. Adrenal gland mass measuring 1.27 by 3.2 centimeters, and sadly, metastasis to the brain, ×3. Largest mass on her brain was just over 2 centimeters. We would await a plan of attack, knowing full well we did not have enough patients to wait, but eventually we would meet with radiation oncologist Dr. Tai and chemical oncologist Dr. Zarkovich. It was during our first visit with Dr. Tai that we would abruptly hear that the cancer did in fact spread to the brain, which caught us off guard. Once entering Alan Blair Clinic, we had a wonderful navigator, nutritionist, and my favorite pain specialist, Dr. Johnson. It was during our initial visit that I would recognize that advocacy is so much of this journey, and my mom did not know that. She didn't have it in her. She had a team that would advocate for her though, Auntie Debbie Morash, Auntie Mona Kaminsky, that at one point told my mom's GP after nights of fighting pain that if she was an old dog, you would take her out back and shoot her. Now you see, my mom had been leery about alcohol, drugs, and even pharmaceuticals because she had a sister who struggled with addiction. It was in Dr. Johnson's office that hydromorph oxycodone was mentioned, and my mom put the brakes on hard. I explained to the doctor that my mom was worried that she would become addicted, to which Dr. Johnson replied, Jeanette, you will not live long enough to become addicted, especially if you are fighting pain. Her medical cocktail was a game changer. She could eat, sleep lying down in a bed, and eventually sleep through the night. Prior to being diagnosed, Mom visited with the neurologist who had removed the bony spicules around her spinal cord, as they presumed the stenosis, or the narrowing of the vertebrae, was the cause of her pain. It was at this point that my mom nearly lost it. A quote from her medical records was as follows: "This lady is really distressed with her symptoms and is crying. She has no quality of life. I have difficulty in diagnosing the precise cause for her symptoms. There is definitely a psychosomatic component to her pain." Definition of psychosomatic is a psychological condition involving the occurrence of physical symptoms, usually lacking an explanation. This appointment happened less than 3 months prior to her actual and final diagnosis, stage 4 lung cancer. My mom thought she had gone nuts, for real. Now, as an advocate for mental health, in my most recent years since experiencing postpartum depression, this is not the terminology I would have used. However, that was her terms. Although we had not talked about it, I could only imagine how she felt with this reaction, as she was merely just trying to live pain-free. I could only assume, beyond feeling unheard, she was so very frustrated with her journey thus far. I would learn the reason for my mom's immediate reaction of relief at the time of her actual diagnosis, and further the bragging sense that she displayed in the days that followed. Finally, a reason for my pain. My mom underwent maximum radiation to her brain, followed by 4 different chemotherapy concoctions. During the second line of chemo, Mom had a significant allergic reaction. The remaining of them were successful in a sense, as they were working to shrink the tumors, however, changing her appearance, her inner organs, her ability to use the washroom or walk by herself. She was described by her chemo doctor in a report as, "The patient is an elderly woman, sitting in a wheelchair, who looks chronically ill, on oxygen via nasal cannula." She was not elderly. She was 64 and yet to receive her first pension check. We arranged to have family and friends look after all 4 of my girls, as I headed to Regina for one of Mom's follow-up appointments on a Tuesday, mid-September 2013. It was my plan to speak to Mom of her wishes, as who she wanted to be her minister at her funeral, who would be her pallbearers, and what she wanted to be buried in. I had not seen her deterioration, as I had been around her enough to only see her as my mom. However, while she was at my house the week before, she was unrecognizable to a family friend. And later that same evening, my cousin Jen asked if anyone had asked my mom about her wishes. I was unclear as to why she would ask such an end-stage question. She is a nurse. She saw it. I just saw my mom. During that trip, I asked her all the hard questions. I grabbed a wheelchair to get her to the washroom. I transferred her to the toilet. I helped her with her bottoms, maneuvered her oxygen tank and hose, wheeled her through the hospital, getting all the looks that clinically sick people receive. The look of pity and sadness. The clinical results came back as though the treatments were working, and at this time, that was our focus. The quality of life had left her long before. She could no longer tolerate wind, as she could easily lose her breath without having a force of wind causing that extra panic. She could no longer read the paper, as her vision had been affected by the treatments. While she was undergoing treatments, she could no longer be amongst her garden, or flowers, or cattle, all of which she loved, because the sun could be damaging. I remember her gazing out the window looking so lost and defeated, unable to do the chores she once loved. She clung to watching birds through the window and listening to gospel music. That Tuesday appointment with results that we wanted and stares we ignored brought the beginning of the end. September 18th, 2013, Mom had a fall in the house, resulting in a fractured upper arm and right hip. She was taken by ambulance to the closest hospital for x-rays and was transferred to the care of a surgeon the following day. As we parted ways when she was being loaded onto the ambulance, she looked at me and said, "There is no reason to cry." Words that have healed, yet haunted me for nearly a decade. We arrived in Regina on Friday with hopes of surgery to happen on Saturday. An incoming emergency slid us to the following day. Sunday morning, Mom was taken into surgery after the anesthetist informed me, her medical proxy, "It is my fear that your mother's condition will prevent a favorable outcome." I remember consenting to the surgery, only to second guess myself. However, she could not live like this. A broken hip, she cannot sit. Lung cancer, partially collapsed lung, decreased independent breathing function with each hour that passes. I remember Auntie Mona spinning around after they wheeled my mom away, finding the yellow concrete hospital wall and slamming her fists on it with regrets of sending her and all the uncertainty that was to come. Immediately, I contacted all of my family to come to the city, as potentially things were gonna go south. Immediate family, aunts, uncles, and cousins flocked to the hospital in support, as Mom was so loved. As she came out of recovery, her breathing immediately changed. She had a sheer look of panic and desperation as she tried to find a breath. Respiratory was called over the intercom and the room filled with a hustle. I became firm with my mom, shouting to her, "Slow down, Mom. Just stay calm. Slow breath." Yet the panic remained. She was strapped with a non-rebreather, sedated heavily, and her family was to process that the end was near. Hours had passed, and Dad refused to leave the hospital, staying with her. For the day and night. Sorry, it's getting blurry. He asked for the chaplain of the hospital and the Ukrainian Orthodox minister of Regina to come. The family piled into the room for a small service as we recited the Lord's Prayer, and her face let us know that she was most definitely still a part of that room. Tuesday morning came, and I surfaced from the basement of my cousin's house. It was a bright and sunny fall day. I mentioned to Jared and my cousin that today is a good day to die. Within the next hour, a large bird had hit the picture window, and I knew today would be the day. You see, my mom was not really superstitious. However, from a young age, I knew that if a bird hit the window, that meant someone would be calling. Usually a family member would have passed. That afternoon, I sat outside the hospital with Dad, asking him, "Is it wrong that I just want her to go?" While Mom was still able to communicate, I specifically asked her, "Mom, are you scared to die?" And in typical Jeanette fashion, she replied with, What do I have to be scared of? That in itself allowed the process, the end, to be beautiful. We were given some end-of-day brochures by the chaplain to teach us about death and dying. In it explained that dying is similar to the birth process, the beginning of something new. It explained how the body will slowly close itself off, allowing hearing to maintain until the end. We were all lucky enough to have these moments to share with her what we needed to. We were able to ease into a life without Mum because of the cancer, because of the treatments, but before sunset, on September 24th, 2013, she passed away, pain-free. She gently took her last breath, and she was surrounded by her family and a hallway full of more family. We sobbed and we prayed, sobbed out of gut-wrenching sadness, but more so that her body was finally free. Some may wonder why I referred to it as Cancerland. Although our time in Cancerland had been finalized with the loss of my mum, it was evident from the first time we set foot into the Ellen Blair Cancer Clinic, or even after her initial CT confirming there was a mass, procedures, appointment, and care seemed to have changed for my mum. She was treated genuinely, with more delicacy as she triumphed every blood test, biopsy, alteration in schedule even, like a hero, surviving the beast that tried to tear her down from the inside. Cancerland became a place of comfort and teaching of empathy as we acknowledged and connected with others on the same path as my mum. Empathy also for the staff that nurtured my mum, that faced more illness and loss imaginable, yet still continued to care for others. It became the deep breath that gave Mum will and desire to stand her ground and consent to keep going. That did not alter. Her goal was to make it to my cousin Christy's wedding and be alive when my twins were born. She did that and surpassed it by 7 weeks before her body made the final decision. How has my time in Cancerland changed me? It has led me to be like Grover, the monster at the end of the book. I think that an ingrown hair is an initial sign of something that has been missed, or a cough will likely be the beginning of the end. I would think that anyone who has been through the loss because of cancer would be permanently changed between the ears. And I currently see a clinical psychologist to help me unwind my own thoughts. It has shook my ability to trust the medical field, as I am still haunted by the many sleepless nights she endured prior to an official diagnosis. It makes me waver between saving for the future and we only live once. My mom had one regret, that she worked too hard and played too little. She was saving for retirement before she would embrace travel. Her first and only pension check came the month she passed away, the month after she turned 65. It has taught me how suddenly things can change, and we are most definitely not the ones in control of that. It has led me to become more spiritually connected, feeling most supported during my grieving time, and realized I was never alone nor aware of it before this journey. It has allowed me to have a voice for the things that truly matter to me and those that I love. My gratitude for my community that I raised my girls, and to how the small army pulled in for weeks and months so I could separate being a mom of 4 little kids to be a daughter, to be able to plan a funeral, attend, and mourn. I've learned that the highway to Regina will never feel the same. I spent hours with travel for Mom for appointments, many of which caused wails and tears from Mom as the highway was so aggravating for her prior to Dr. Johnson. I learned that my dad did not in fact lose his sense of humor the day my mom passed away. On the way home later that evening, Dad was lying down in the back seat and he piped up saying, "Well, I thought I was gonna go broke there." And I'm confused, sitting in the front seat. While the chaplain comes, says a prayer, I dip into the wallet and hand over a 50. The minister comes, says a prayer, I dip into the wallet, hand over another 50. If this was going to continue, I'd have to head over to the bank. Mother's Day 2014. First Mother's Day since she has passed. The kids and I head to the cemetery, and as I'm about to turn in, I change the radio station to GX94, which would constantly be playing in Mom's kitchen while growing up. What song is on? Wagon Wheel. And the lyrics go like this: rock me mama like the wind and the rain, rock me mama like a southbound train. Hey, hey, mama rock me. This was challenging, listening to the song, going to her grave on this special day. This was also rewarding. This song, on her station, feeling supported and surrounded by her, although she was no longer. Although it has been 9 full years without having her here, I still sense her frequently enough, as I do all the hard things that come with parenting, such as teaching my kids about puberty, teaching teenagers about sassy attitudes and a terrible tone, teaching young ones how to plant seed in dirt in the springtime or harvesting the garden, or adding oatmeal to cookies. She is around, and if you have ever experienced loss of a loved one, look for them in the signs that they are showing you. The gentle gust of the wind, the song of the birds, the flutter of a butterfly, or the warmth of the sun shining down. Growing up, my parents didn't necessarily have all the tools to talk about tough emotions. Crying was perhaps viewed as a weakness, and with therapy and self-encouragement, I never wavered from showing my 4 young ladies the pain I can occasionally feel with the absence of such a force and fierce woman. I am honoring all the women who have fought this fight or currently still at war, in memory of Penny Vanell, whose journey overlapped Mom's on both ends. She was a warrior full of grace. And for my friend and past co-worker Donna, who is just beginning her journey. I remember having a conversation with my mom that is embedded in my brain as she was wanting to avoid functions because of her appearance, her lack of ability to hear, or the unsteadiness of her feet. I said to her, "Mom, you are not dying. You are living with cancer. Let's do what we can to live and find the small tidbits of joy." For those of you who knew Jeanette, my mom, in her years prior to diagnosis, saw firsthand the amount of excruciating pain she endured. Her one wish in her final days was that she asked to be pain-free. It gives me peace in my heart knowing that we as a first world country have the ability to allow a pain-free release of life. I fully know that my mom would not have wanted a room full of tears and sobs rather view her as an iron force, focusing on her acceptance of death, the relief she felt at the time of her diagnosis, although terminal, and her reassurance that the endless pain was not an illusion. Dying is a part of life, however, suffering is not. If there is a lesson to be learned in this journey before Cancerland, find a voice. Be an advocate and stay consistent. We are ultimately the keeper of our own bodies and responsible for the communication around what is happening. Be articulate. Speak up, loud and clear. Get the results you are entitled to without hesitation. Find cracks in the system and step over them, for the end result will be worth it. This is a part of my life that perhaps has calloused me, yet allowed a new perspective on living, and how I choose to view the small challenges that come my way. And as for my time in Cancerland, it never really ends. It just changes. Thank you.